My mom's first job when she came to the States was working at McDonald's. My dad's first job when he came to the States was working at a car wash. So seeing all that, I remember being, how old was I? I moved to the States when I was 11. I remember being 13 and my parents having to take, 13. I was 11 or 12. 12. I might have been 12, yeah. And how, my dad he took out an extra job cleaning a restaurant at night. But we couldn't afford a babysitter, so they would take me on school nights and I would sleep in the car while they cleaned. Which, all that sacrifice that they did is basically what pushes me to strive for education.
To me, it means everything. I'm the first generation in my family, as far as we know, to have graduated from high school. Wow. And so going to college was a big deal. Where I grew up, kind of a Hispanic working class background, I would say Mexican American and Chicano background, back west, college was not an option. Acquiring knowledge for the sake of knowledge or bettering yourself was not an option that was given to us. There were no college outreach programs in my community. When you would do well in school, the teachers and counselors would often kind of look at you oddly.
I woke up in the morning in the U.S. side when I was 12 years old just to go to school. My mom used to put my green card in my backpack. Wow. And she used to tell me, because our house was kind of right about 100 feet from the border fence on the U.S. side. So when my mom sent me out to catch the bus, she put my green card on my backpack and said, "All right, if the border patrol stops you, show them this card." And in fact, it happened. It happened because I missed my bus multiple times. Sometimes when I was growing up, and my dad had to take me. He was a taxi driver, my dad, so I had to go and get a ride from my dad to school, and he got a little bit mad at me. So my mom used to put the green card in my backpack and send me out about 20 minutes ahead of time for the bus, just to factor in the uncertainty of being racially profiled or not. I grew up with that notion that when you're racially profiled, you feel like a criminal. You feel that you see a figure, you see, for example, a border patrol or something, and you sort of look away because there's a sort of criminality that subconsciously instilled in you while you're being racially profiled. So I grew up with that, and then I became conscious of it and aware of the psychological stress and academic stress that was placing on me while I was an impressionable youth. And now that I have my PhD, I really feel that I need to come back into the community and fight that.
But knowing that there's possibility, the hope again, there's a possibility that my family can lift themselves out of these trenches as a community and not individually. If we can do this with each other, then we can change the way we live our lives, change the way people see us and understand us, change our circumstance and change ourselves. So for me, I have to give credit to my family as well. They may not understand higher education, they may not understand what a PhD does, they think that'll open every door in the world for me. But I think that, they find victory in my victory, so this is for them, not just me.
There was no guidance when I got here. And, I had a faculty mentor, but they didn't really mentor me. They didn't think I had the need to be mentored. And I was literally reaching out for people to help me, and not many did. The thing is, I'm a very strong person, and so and I'm also very hard-headed. So I was like, no, this is happening. I want to do what I want to do, and I will graduate. And I did encounter a lot of difficulties. Racism was one of them. I was told that I was too Hispanic for my own good. Whenever I wanted to do something that was different, it's like, are you sure? Is that what you really want to do? Because, not a lot of Hispanic people are involved in that, and so on and so forth.
At least in the state of Florida, that there was a huge Latino population, but then when you came to one of the best schools that the state has to offer, it didn't mirror the population of the state. And as a public institution, that was troubling. I definitely felt more so as a woman, and then a woman of color, that, you know, this was a man's world. The University of Florida was a boys' club, and you were either in or you were out, and there was no room for women in that club. So that was very clear, not just to Latina women, but to women in campus, period. So for me, it was very clear that as not, you know, if you're not one of the boys in the boys club, then you were out. And so what did that mean? And so for us it was like, okay, so if you're not a person of color and you manage to somehow make those connections, then you're going to have already a path, right? Part of student government, maybe you're lucky you get invited to Florida Blue Key, you start meeting politicians, and there's like this path that there was like a treadmill that you could jump on and they would take you there. But if you were not part of that, then there was really very little for you. There was such a lack of awareness about Latinos at the University of Florida. I will never forget when I went to an SG meeting to present the case of why we needed funding to help furnish, because we were told, yeah, you'll get the building, but there's no money for furnishings. And so we went to talk to SG and said, look, you guys already supported us in getting this building, we really appreciate it, but now we got to talk money. And so they're like, well, it's going to be a tough sell. And I went to a meeting, SG meeting, and they allowed me to do my presentation. And then there was like a debating period where different members of SG got to express their opinion about why they should or should not give money to Latino students. And the things that were coming out of these people's mouth. I sat there and my jaw almost dropped. Well, why do, why should we give money to Latino students? I mean, it just, the kinds of things they were saying, I remember walking out so angry. And I don't even remember now whether when they took the vote, they did win or did not win, because for me, I was like so clear of the lack of understanding about Latino culture and just the lack of nobody cared. I mean, as far as they were concerned, they were SG. Why should they give money to Latino students? We were further segregating our community by doing that. That was their position. And I just left so angry and so disappointed, thinking, wow, we have a lot of work to do, because there was absolutely no desire. It was just this complete and utter sense of like, who are you people? And so that was really disheartening, because in my heart, I was a Gator like any other Gator. I was no different than anybody else in that room. And yet in their heart of hearts, I was a very different type of Gator.
It just reminded me again that this society hasn't progressed one iota, in the sense that students from, and this is a broad statement, but students from working class African American, Asian American, and Latino backgrounds go to schools like that latter school very often. Not always, but very often. They go to schools where the emphasis is not on learning, but the emphasis is on discipline and control, because the idea is that we are going to be the soldiers, the fry cooks, the maids, the people who receive orders, not give orders, right? And so this is one of the reasons why I tell people, when I'm talking to prospective graduate students, one of the funnest things I do is every spring, the graduate school calls me in and I talk to prospective grad students of color. And most of them are first generation. And I say, now is our chance to give back. Not in a negative sense, but I tell them every time I'm able to help a white student from many generations of privilege, it actually gives me as much joy as if I'm helping someone who came from my kind of background, because I can see how the society is structured to prevent us from being successful. And so, it's not the fault of the University of Florida that society, that Florida is set up in such a way that Latino students and Black students go to schools that are under-resourced, over-policed, undereducated, blah, 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 blah. But it is up to the University of Florida to create an educational environment where once you arrive in this campus, you have an equal opportunity to excel. That's all La Casita does.
That as we were getting involved and more organizations were coming and more students were coming, we find out that this building was going to be vacated and that the administration had not figured out yet what they wanted to do with it. And so immediately for us was like, that's ours. And so we put proposals together and we sent it to to the university administration to say, this is what we want this place to be. But we really had to work hard at defining what that was, the concept itself. There was an Institute of Black Culture, right? So we would borrow from that concept of what the Institute of Black Culture was. But we really were trying to figure out, what does it mean to us and what do we want it to be? And that's where all these negotiations about language and the tone and how aggressive or not aggressive do we want it to be with it. But at the bottom, at the very sort of at the most simplest of forms, we knew that we wanted this to be a home away from home for Latino students. And we put that in writing. We put it in the proposal that this is going to be the home away from home for Latino students. When you look at a lot of what was being said, and maybe there's some research that backs this up, there's always been this notion that Latino students don't go far away to college because they don't want to be far away from family. And so we said, look, if you're serious about attracting Latino students to come or study here, you need to offer a place that's going to be their home away from home. I don't remember the exact date, but it was about a year-long process. So I'm going to say started in 92, 93. So we put a proposal in paper. 4 people. We're talking about 4 people sitting together, hashing this out, putting it in paper. We've shipped it over to the administration, and we had great faculty. There was a Latino Hispanic Faculty Association, and the president, a gentleman by the name of Fernando Fagundo, who was a civil engineer, was the president, and he's like, oh, you guys are interested in doing this, then we'll support you. So we had support and guidance from faculty members and from administrators. Latino administrators. And so that was helpful to us. But in terms of students, it was really a small group of students that put this in paper and pushed it forward. And then at that point, what sort of became apparent was this notion that, like, look, at the end of the day, this is a political process. And it's going to be about how much support we can get both from the inside and from the outside for this thing to be happen. Because we knew that what we were asking for was big. The university had never in their million years expected or thought or would want to do this on their own. This had to come from a pressure point. I mean, the day of the grand opening of La Casita, so I actually have this picture where they covered the sign, and Livia and I got to unveil that sign. And I have to say, to this day, like, that's one of the most meaningful moments in my life, that I knew something big had just happened. And we had Senator Bob Graham, the president was here, everybody from the state of Florida was here, because for the first time, for crying out loud, this was 1994, and we were still talking about doing something for Latino students when the explosion of the Hispanic population in the state had happened 10 years before then. So for us, this was like late in the game. For them, it was like, look at us, we're doing something great here. And so they invited the world to this thing. That day, when we got to unveil that sign and we got to invite everybody to see this space and to talk about what we hoped this space would be, it really was meaningful in the sense that we knew something special was happening. And then that fall, when we had the first homecoming, we decided to have a party here, Latino style. And we had food and we had music and we put the flags up, and this is prime real estate for the homecoming parade. And when all the people, alumni, everybody descended on La Casita for that homecoming, that's when it hit me. That's when I knew, okay, this is not going to go anywhere. People are invested in this place now, because we had alumni, we had faculty, we had administrator, we had students, we had graduate students, we had parents who would come to visit, and they were like, come on in, this is clearly where I fit, right? I don't fit in another alumni event. I fit here with these Latino students that are playing my music and eating my food and celebrating it. And I remember sitting out here on the porch, and people just kept coming by to congratulate us, and we would welcome them. And it was just this like constant revolving door, people going, wow. And we're like, and that's when it finally hit me, I think. Yeah, this is big. This is important. I'm so glad we got to do this. This is really going to be meaningful for people.
A regular day at La Casita for me personally just seems like it's me going in sometime in the morning or mid-afternoon, putting my things down on one of the tables, saying good morning everyone or good afternoon, walking into Olivia's office saying hi. And when it was Dr. Castillo, the same thing, walking in saying hi, and then looking for, a free mug that was, clean, pouring myself a cup of coffee and sitting down and just relaxing, because it's just in a perfect location. The sun is shining in and it's just on the table, so it's perfect. The chairs are comfortable, and when they leave the door open, there's this beautiful breeze. I'm making it sound very dreamy, but that's really what it feels like.
That's great. That's how you feel about it.
Yeah. And, I'll sit there, I'll start doing work, I'll start finishing up some homework or just, chatting online. And once I'm done, I'll go upstairs and I'll sit there in front of the computer, I'll print out my work, go back downstairs, pack my things up, because I usually only have about an hour to be there, because then I have to run off to class, and just say goodbye to everyone and feel like there's nothing weird about completely walking in, grabbing a cup of coffee, finishing your work, and leaving. Like, it's just so comfortable.
Well, the thing, La Casita, may I refer to it as La Casita?
Sure.
Henceforth be known as La Casita. It's La Casita offers a space that allows students such as myself that do not necessarily fit into the classical student mold. It offers us a space to express as well as to find identity. We find identity in the conversations we have with other Hispanic student organizations, so that we ourselves find our place at UF and don't feel like we have to be part of, whatever the university thinks is best or promotes, rather. So this alternative space that La Casita offers, it offers for growth, because my time at UF would have been a heck of a lot worse if I didn't have La Casita as an outlet for me just to hang out, feel at home and comfortable enough to talk Spanglish, to work in activism, to have Dr. Castillo, tell me how bad I'm at activism. La Casita offers not just a refuge, but at the same time it fosters that kind of mentality as well, in creating a safe space for Hispanic students and students that are not traditional and non-traditional, to clarify, students, like I said, that don't necessarily want to go to the same route that everyone does when they get to college. It also creates relationship amongst those individuals, and if you have a conscious space and create that conscious mentality, then you can only, we set up to change the world, I guess, in a very idealistic way, and that sounds very idealistic.
It was just, I grew up there. I changed my life at La Casita. I knew that I always lived on campus because I didn't want to learn how to drive. So I lived in Mallory, and that was my day. I would wake up, go to La Casita, work, go to the gym, go to classes and things like that. And it was the conversations, the friendship, knowing that if my parents, though they lived in Ocala, I would take a little bit longer to be here because I needed them to be here. I would always have somebody there. Now, even if you were hungry, I remember they had a rice cooker, and there was always rice and beans in the kitchen. So if anybody was hungry, they could just go and cook and eat something, So IHLC, the Institute of Hispanic-Latino Cultures, it means home to me. It really does. And the people there, and La Viejita there, because I've heard it too. And, opening, I would be the first one opening. I'll be the last one too, some days, and spend weekends there. So you really, that the connotation, the denotation of La Casita, that's what it really is my home. And I always go back.
I remember my birthday last year because that was the first time that people were excited for my birthday. And I came in, and I'm going to cry because I always cry. But I came in and everybody had balloons and things for me, and it was so nice. But other than that, I don't know. It's just nice to go in and have a group of people who care about you. So, darn it, I knew I was going to cry. There was one time that I came in and I had to write a paper, and I kept getting distracted, and every time I looked up, somebody would yell at me to work. some people who would hold you accountable, and I don't know, they just care for you, even if it's just like the momentary staff that are there. So I've been there for a really long time, so I've seen a lot of turnover, but it's still, I don't know, it's nice to see people like laughing there.
Yeah.
Damn it, stop crying.
So when you ask me like what La Casita did to kind of change my outlook, it's kind of like that conversation. How about it's not like one momentous event that kind of changed my life. It's just like a series of events.
So it's like the exposure.
It's just the constant exposure, like working with like Dr. Castillo, who is an amazing individual, but then also working with like the other students who are also amazing people, and we're all exploring these issues of justice, talking about like socioeconomic status, like issues of racial injustice, like immigration status and comprehensive immigration reform, sexuality, the intersectionality of all these issues. Like I felt like I learned more at La Casita than I did in all of my undergraduate classes.
One of the things that we wanted to see happen as part of this process of creating La Casita and all of that was that we could actually develop a program of Latino studies, because we had a great Center for Latin American Studies, but there was no Latino studies, and there's a big difference between those two. And so we were trying to push for that, but it unfortunately never got off the ground.
There are definitely some issues. I think one of them is finding mentors whom they can identify with. The University of Florida does have some Hispanic Latino faculty, but it's not enough. And you can't have 20, 30 students be assigned to one faculty member to mentor. Like it doesn't work that way. Like the university needs to do a better job of recruiting diverse faculty and staff so that students have someone whom they can talk to and whom they can, relate to. Because it's different. When you have someone you can relate to, who's been where you've been, who knows what your struggles are, who shares some common history, some common heritage, their words carry so much more weight, so much more. And when you're a student who's the first in your family to go to college and looking to go to graduate school and get a PhD, if there's no one at that level that you can look up to, that you can ask, how did you do it? What do I need to do? And whom you trust and who understands where you're coming from, the chances of you getting there are slimmer. I also think that being said, not only is there a recruitment issue for diverse faculty and staff, it's a retention issue. I understand that the state of Florida has gone many budget cuts, but something needs to be said for the fact that people who leave the university, a lot of them are minorities because they just don't find their own support systems here. And I can think of several professors who've left and several staff members who have left. And it's disheartening because I would venture to say that when students look up to those people and then they leave, students don't know what to do with themselves at that point in time. They lose a mentor. And even if you can email them, it's not the same as being able to drop by in office hours and be able to talk to them face to face. I think there needs to be more support for Hispanic Latino students overall. The Institute of Hispanic-Latino Cultures is a good place for students, but it's a resource that's kept hidden sometimes. I've known students who have only visited La Casita during their fourth year. Like, that's when they heard about it. And that means there's something to be said, because I know La Casita does advertising and marketing. It has to be said for the places where students go, others are not sharing the resources effectively. And I think that needs to change as well.
Although we're the largest minority or minoritized population of this campus, we are still highly under-resourced. Me, as director, there's one professional staff that's in charge of 15% of the population of this campus, So resources, is tough, and representation is tough. There's, like I said, less than 10 probably that I'm probably inflating that number of Latino professional staff in student affairs. So there's no community, there's no support, there's no resource, there's no representation. And there's faculty that have not received tenure, Latino faculty have not received tenure, faculty that are leaving. So something's not right here at UF. You know, I'm leaving after 2.5 years, you know, so like read into things, you know, and find out like, wow, like, so some things need to change on this campus, you know, and I think representation is a huge issue for us. And that's on a professional scale. On a student scale, I mean, representation in political offices on this campus, you know, we are seen as a voting bloc, just like we are nationally. We're seen as a voting bloc, so we have a primary function. And a lot of Latino students, if they want to thrive and succeed here in student government, you know, will buy into that rhetoric and will actually follow that path rather than like resisting or trying to create change. And so, you know, there's some students that will play the role and will move up and be very successful, and we'll have students that resist and will not be successful in certain spaces. So I think there's a lot of history at UF that works against all oppressed communities, and until UF is willing to acknowledge that, to dialogue about it, you know, to strategize around it, and to change it. It doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what kind of protests we do, it doesn't matter what kind of programs, events, and staff we bring to this campus, things aren't going to systemically change. We need to have a groundswell, complete overhaul. It's a system of domination that needs to be overturned. We need not only a paradigm shift, we need to have these metaphorical walls tumble and build up with our hands in it, and not as laborers, but as ideological constructors of a new educational era for UF.
That, yes, we felt strongly about it back then, but we really, in our young age, there was no way for us to really foresee everything that you guys have done with this place and what it has, more importantly for me, hearing students talk about what it's meant for them personally, that for me is where I feel the success comes in, because you get it and you made it into something bigger and better. That for me is success, right? If it would have just stayed stagnant, if it would have been the exact same thing that we did 20 years ago, but the growth, the level of programs, even the caliber of directors that you guys are hiring, we had to find when we were said, okay, well, you guys will have an input on the first director, great, we want a PhD person. And they all said, no, we're not bringing in a PhD person. And we all said, well, why not? And so they're like, no, we're just gonna bring somebody maybe with a master's degree. So even just, seeing how everything has evolved, hearing you guys talk about the vision for this year includes words such as social justice and advocacy. We couldn't use those words 20 years ago. And now I looked at what you guys have done this month, Immigrant Forum, arts, everything you guys have done, and I thought, yeah, I wish I could have been able to do that 20 years ago. We couldn't. But you guys have taken it and made so much about it that I think that's where I find the meaning, is that sense of ownership and taking it and then willing to go to the next level and pushing and going better and wanting to do more. You can't put a tag on that.
But we definitely want to make La Casita the voice for the Hispanic community on campus, fighting for social justice and making the UF community aware of issues that affect their community, and providing students with a safe space and a home away from home, which this has always been, but also fighting for the rights of our community and educating others.
It's it's very homey, warm. I love it here. I've always loved it here. We'll always love it here. It's the right vibe. Yeah.
Thank you.